So functions, as I discussed, functions can be used to structure our program. And usually function, you can think it as a giving a name for a block of statement. So this is very, very helpful in case if you are repeating or using a same code again and again. So two things. One is you can use this once you define a function, like we already use built-in functions like print. You can create your own function and you can use later on, which means you can develop a function for one project and that can be used for another project. So that's what the primary use of functions. But when it comes to Python, we use def keyword to define a function. It's called defining a function, which will provide a name, and then we provide any values that we need to pass into the function. So for example, let's say I want to create function add. So like this, if I want to function add 2,3, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to add two numbers, 2 and 3, and I'm expecting an answer of adding these two. As you can see, Python will complain because this is not a built-in. Built-in means when you install Python, you already have a set of functions. So this is not a built-in function. Therefore, we need to create our own function definition. So to do that, we have to use def keyword and then name of the function. Of course, we have going to use add. And right now we are trying to use two values. So that means when you are defining, you have to use two variable names to get these two. We call parameters. So let's say I'm going to say number 1 and number 2. Right. Now, this is the template, and within this body, we have to tell what exactly we want to do. So I'm going to use first print statement, and then I will explain how to use return statement. So the first one is we will use number 1 and number 2. Simply what we do, we add these two numbers together and we print it. So if you do this, now you can notice we can call the function add 2,3, and you can notice that even Python identified interpreter will say that, okay, it expect two values. So 10 and let's say 20, right? So you can use this, right? So that's the basic understanding of creating functions and how to use the functions. Right. So this is we call creating functions, and then and this function we call it will not return any value to main function. So why we say like this? Because if you go back to my original working on the problem, what happens here is you cannot further process this. I will explain that in a minute. So the right now, what happens when you create or when you call a function, that number 2 will be passed to number 1. Then number 3 will be passed to number 2. And that's all. It just print it out and you get the outcome. So nothing will come back. You cannot store or you cannot further process it. Right. Now, having said that, now let's move into the next part. So that's why we say it will not return any value. And then when you call it, we will use the values we call, these are called arguments. And of course, although we use here integer values, you could use any other values as well. Because depending on the way we have defined it, you can use any other values as well. Let me explain. Now, for example, you can use floating point values, floats, and no issue, and we'll get answer. Right. Small question from you, right? What about this? Sorry. I told you like function is a we provide a name for a block of statement, and it will does exactly what we have written. So for example, here, when we send 10 and 20 as a string values. So this was the question that I have put. So what happens, this 10 will pass it to here. So we have string, right? We have a string value. And then the next one, again, we have a string value. 20, we'll pass it to number 2. Again, string 20. And see what we are doing here, right? Simply what we will do is we have string 10 plus string 20. So what is the answer? We discussed this idea earlier. If you have two strings and a plus, that is called string concatenation. And simply we should get, combining this and print it as a number, but you will get, 10 and 20 together as a glued, it's a string, right? So that's what we need to understand. So therefore, we have to be very careful sometimes when you're creating functions as well, because, people can use in various ways. Although you are intended to add numbers, you can't have a control of what user can do. So you have to be very careful. But for the time being, what we are discussing, how to create this. I hope you got the idea, right? Simply we are getting two variables, right? And then we use plus, and then we print it out, and we are supposed to add numbers. Right, of course, a small exercise for you. Can you give me a simple function definition for add 3 numbers? Okay, so let me take defining adding 3 numbers. So I'm going to say a different name. Let me use add 3. Let me use N1, N2, and N3. You can use any variables. And then simply we can say, okay, N1 plus N2 plus N3. Good. And then to check that now, we can use 3 numbers. Let's say 2, 3, 4, and then add 3. Let's say 23, 67, and 9. Okay, we are basically adding 3 numbers here. Right, good. I think you are now comfortable with this. Now, one of the differences of the functions that we have discussed right now from what is available uh, in Python, for example, there are slight differences. For example, there's a function called ABS, right? There's a function called ABS. Let me say -5. And it provides, +5. So if you look at the help function, you know that what ABS does, it will provide us the absolute value, and then whatever the value, it will return the absolute value of the argument. But the beauty of this is you can, if you use, let's say, variable answer, and if you use ABS -5, and then you can say print answer, right? You can use in this fashion if you use ABS. Let me take another one. There's another built-in function which you call max, will actually give you, maximum value, right? Something like this. And you can see that it's arbitrary number of, arguments could be used, right? Which you can use it within this. So for example, if you look at help again here, for example, I can say help max, and you will get that it says max, it's iterable, and then you can use biggest item, you can notice that. And then you can provide 2 more arguments, return the largest one, so you can have any number of arguments. And for example, you can use, okay, for example, let's say max number, and I'm going to use this, the very same thing. You can notice that we can call the function, and we can store it, and then simply we can say, okay, print max. So this is slightly different from what we have done earlier. So what happens, there's a function definition, and this will, put these values into the function definition, and you will get the answer back, and that will be stored on the max number, and we can print it max number. Now, if you try to do this with the two functions we have defined, let me show you. We have created two functions, add functions. So let me say add. So I'm going to say answer equals add 2, 3, right? And if you press enter, what will happen? Yes, what will happen? Right. Now, a couple of things we discussed. One thing is if you use answer equals at 2, 3 with our previous definition, we have used print. Therefore, when you say 2, 3, you get 5 as the output because we had a print statement. And nothing will come back. Therefore, when you try to print answer, you will get none. To update this one, we have to modify like this. We have to say def add number 1, number 2. We are using the return keyword here. Return number 1 and number 2. And when you use answer at 2, 3 and print answer, now you will get the answer like the other built-in functions available in Python. So let me explain how this will work. So when you use in this fashion, what happens? The number 2 will pass it to number 1. And then number 3 will pass it to number 2. And it will add those two numbers, and we'll get the answer here, right? Because we say number 1 plus number 2, the answer will return back here. So when you pass 2 and 3, right? So 2 will be passed here, right? And then 3 will be passed here, 2, 3. And we know that this is 5. This is 5. 5 will return here. So this is 5. So answer is 5. So that's why when you say print answer, you will get number 5. So that's why when you use a return keyword here, this function we call function with return values. It will return value back into the main program. Right. Good. Right. A small question from the previous. Can you write a similar function where you add 3 numbers and return the values? So let me explain creating a function called area rectangle, which takes, let's say, width and length to find the area for width and height to get the area of a rectangle. So I'm going to take 2 parameters we call width and then height. And then simply I'm going to use return the multiplication of this, right? We'll multiply with height, right? So let me save this. Let me say this is now program number 15, right? And let me run this. Now, when you execute this, run this, we don't see anything in the shell, but now you can use the function. So for example, let's say I can say area rectangle. And I can provide the two values. Let's say width 20 and then the height 10. And we get 200, right? Okay. So let me say we are going to use another function. So in this one, we will say area square. We know that we need only a length of the square, right? I could have written how it calculates here. But let me explain. Instead of creating from the calculations, I'm going to use the previous one. For example, we could say something like this, isn't it? We could say, using the same function, let's say I'm going to find the area of a square. Let's say the length is 10. So I could say 10 and 10 like this. Okay. So the idea is you can make use of the previous one. So when I'm creating a function for calculate area of a square, what I could do, I can make use of a previous function, area rectangle, and then I can call width and height with the length. So I'm passing length here to that, right? So if I do this, what happens? Now I have a function. When we say area square, let's say we have 10, we get 100. But if you see me how this will work, so let me show you. So in this particular case, that 10 will pass it here. So this 10 will pass it to this. It will pass it to here. And then what happens, that same length will set it to width. And then this is set it to height. And then we have answer. So we have answer, width and height. And it will return. So when it returns, that answer will return here, right? So this is how it will work. So when you write functions, you can use what is existing and you can make use of write very complex functions, right? So that's what I want to highlight here. Functions can call other functions. That is the lesson that I want to discuss under this one. So I hope that is clear to you. So in this particular example, what we did, we created a function for rectangle to find the area of a rectangle, and then to find area square, we make use of the previous function. So that's what we see here, right? So you can call other functions, right? Okay, so with that, I think we can move to the next one, which is again very important point that I want to highlight. Right. So let me start. Right. Without trying this code, without typing this code, can you tell me what is the output of this code? Code, you have two print statements. And what we expect here is usually from the things that we have discussed so far, you might think that, okay, A is 0. So print A will return 0. And then if you change A will be changed to 1 and it will print 1. No, it's not the correct answer. And that is exactly what I want to discuss it here. So in this code, right, what happens? So let me, take a new window, file, new file. And then Let me type the code. We have variable a, which is 0. And then we have function def. We have change a, which is a function. Within that function, we have another variable a, which will change it to a. Then we will say print a, and then change a, and then print a. Right. So let me show you the code. So let me save the code. So I'm going to say this is programmer 16. Right. Now, what happens here? So you might think that when you say a equals 0, you print a, you will get 0. And change a, it will change. And then you will get 1. No. What really happens if you run this, you will notice that you are getting 2 zeros. The reason for this is, right, the a, this variable assignment is outside this function, and this variable assignment is inside the function. So if those two are the same, then we have to have the same value, right? So and it's different, right? That's how. So that's exactly what I want to discuss it here. So when you define variables inside the function, we call these are local to this. So therefore, the variables we uh, declare inside the function will be local to that function. So therefore, this a is a local variable. It's local. It will not visible to the outside. Although you might think that it changed one, no, the two a's are totally different. The two a's are totally different. You can check. There's a function. For example, you can say print IDA. So what IDA means, let me say a, right? ID gives you the memory reference at the address of the memory. And let me use a print a inside the function. I will say inside the function. Right. So simply what I actually try to do here is getting memory references when you run it. So this time when you run it, you will get 0, right? And this is the memory reference. That means memory address for the object which stores the value for A. And you can notice here, these are two different memory references. So which means these are like two different, these values are stored in two different places. So that's why we get 0 and 0, right? So I will remove this. So that's why when you run it, you will get 0 and 0, right? They are different, simply. So, but if you want this let me save it as this. Let's say we want this. The change needs to happen, right? I'm going to discuss what we call the global variable. Global means that if you want to say that this A and this A, they both are the same, right? We have to say global. And what happens now? The change will happen. So now the answer is 0 and 1, right? Answer is 0 and 1. So because it's now global, so the change will happen. This is now visible to the outside and we get the answer. Right, okay. So that's what we need to discuss about the functions in Python. So let me give you some exercise for you. Let's work on a couple of functions. Okay, thanks, Sajid, for sharing your answer with us. So let me discuss the answers. For the first one, what you could do, we will, I'm going to take the shell. So for example, we want to say greet somebody and we will request a name. So simply if you are using functions without returning, so let's say greeting, and we can say name, and simply we can say print, we can say hello, and we can say name. So if you use this and if you remember the string that we have discussed, simply this will do the job. So we'll say greeting, and if you say, let's say Sampath says hello Sampath, and this is what we will get. And if I go with the Sachit answer for the second one, if you want to use return instead of this, you can say def greeting name, and then we will use return. You can return F strings and with the same string. The beauty of this is you can store this if you want, but otherwise, if you use the same greeting, it will do the job, right? Same thing, but make a note of this. This time it's return a string, so you notice this. So therefore, the best way when you use a return, you can use print. Right? And then we'll get the desired answer. Okay, the last one, what we need to do is we want to write our functions to temperature in Fahrenheit. The temperature value is in Fahrenheit. And then let's say you want to convert it to degree Celsius, right? So that's what we are going to do. So for that, you need the equation first, right? To formula for Fahrenheit to Celsius. So let me give you that. So for example, let's say I'm going to calculate convert function. So I will say def Fahrenheit to Celsius. You can use any, let me see, Fahrenheit to, let's say, Celsius, right? And then you will get the value in Fahrenheit. Let me say F. And we want to return it to Celsius. So the equation for this is 32 into the Fahrenheit value. So that is 1. And then we will subtract um, whatever the value. Um, Sorry, we have to say we subtract 32 and then we have to multiply by 5 divided by 9. So the idea is Fahrenheit 32 is Fahrenheit 32 is Celsius 0. We can check that. So this is the function. So let's call it Fahrenheit to Celsius. We have 32. So we get the Celsius 0. So for that, actually, you need the formula, but I guess you could have find the formula without any problem, right? Okay, so I hope you got the answer. Right, so let's move to the next part. The very important part again I want to discuss. Right. The next thing that I would like to discuss is how to use modules. In modules, right. So modules in Python. So now we have discussed about the functions and we created various different functions. We did some examples as well. So in this one, we are going to talk about how we can make use of modules. Right. So this is very exciting part of the Python because you are working on mathematics. So there are some maths libraries which you can actually use for your work. And there are many other the libraries for various tasks in data science, machine learning, and even in quantum computing. So you can see one of the exciting features in Python is you have extensive libraries. So in this one, we are going to discuss how we can make use of these modules and how to call functions inside these modules. So although we discuss writing our own functions, most of the time what we need to learn is how to use what is already available and how to choose, the appropriate module for that. So as you can see, when you're using a module, we have to import it, right? And there are some standard libraries with, when you install Python, you already have some libraries are already installed. We call standard library. So let's first look at how to make use of modules in Python. Right. The first thing that we need to understand is how to import modules there because there are various ways that you can actually import modules. So let me explain how to make use of modules first. Right. The first one, for example, finding a square root of function. For example, if you type like this, if you use square root of function, Python will complain that there's no function called square root because in built-in functions, there's no function called square root. But this particular square root function is available in the math library. So if you want to use the square root function available in math library, the first thing that you have to do is use import keyword, and you have to say which library. So we will say import math. And then we can say math dot, then the function name square root. And you can notice that now Python interpreter recognize it. And if you put 2, for example, it will give you the square root of 2. So this is the commonly used one. And what happens here, whatever the functions available, you can directly call using math dot and then the module name. And getting help is also the same. So simply, I think if you say help, math dot square root should give us the help for square root of function. Right. So this is commonly used way, and ideally what happens is any functions within the math module, you can use it using module name dot and then the function name. But then, so this is sometimes very, how do you say, you have to use the library name again and again. But if you're using only 1 or 2, modules or functions in a module, then you can directly call those functions. So which is what we are going to discuss in the second. So for example, if you want to use from math, import square root. So in this one, actually, we are directly, calling the function square root function. And we specifically say that we are actually calling only the square root method. So therefore, if you use this method, then now after this, you can directly call the square root function. So you don't need to specify module name. So I hope this is clear to you now. General use is import math and then math dot the function name. That is if you directly access through the module name. If you want to directly access the function or the method, then you can use from math import square root, and then you can use the square. Make a note of this, very, very important. Right. Now, there's another one variation I want to discuss where we can rename functions, rename modules. So as you can see here, if you use this method, every time when you call a function, you have to use the module name. And if you have a very lengthy module name, this is very tedious task. So in that particular case, you can actually rename this. So what you notice, the third technique is if you use import math and if you use as keyword m, what it means is we are importing math, but we are renaming it as m. So therefore, after this, you can always say m dot square root function like this. So this will be very easy. Or for example, there are very commonly used libraries, numerical Python, which we will discuss next. In numerical Python, we use NumPy, and we can short normally as NP. Similarly, in plotting library, we will use matplotlib, and we will use PLT. So these are like some of the commonly used, shorter version of the modules. So are you clear about the 3 ways? So here are some of the functions available. I know you are working in maths, and if you want to use like standard mathematical functions, you can always use math library. And here I have listed some of them, right? For example, first one, we will find the square root of function. We can calculate the square logarithm of x for the given base. We can find the logarithm x to the base 10, sine, cosine, tangent. Remember that all these 3, we have radians. Then if you want to convert radians to degrees, we have a degrees function. If you want to convert degrees to radians, we have radian functions, C, 4, power of, and even the mathematical constant value like pi and e, yeah, here, right? So make a note of this. Very important. Right. Okay, then. I hope now we are comfortable with um, the how to make use of math module. Um, I can ask you the simple question for you, right? Find sine 13 degrees and give me the code for that.